everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and today I'm going to tell you how I felt about The Man from Earth, Holocene. Now, this is not a brand new movie, this didn't just come out, but I finally got a chance to see it, not realizing that it was on Amazon Prime. I don't know how long it's been there, but I was just surfing around the other day and found it. This is a movie that I found out had come out last year and was hoping to get my hands on it and didn't find any immediate way to watch it, and I had kind of forgotten about it. And then it just popped up on Prime and I was like, okay, cool, finally, the sequel to The Man from Earth. I don't know how many people are going to be interested in this, how many folks have watched this, but for those of you that have, or those of you that are curious or didn't even know that there was a Man from Earth sequel, I thought I would tell you about it and let you know how I felt about it. So this came out January of last year. It was completed in the previous year. I'm not sure why it took as long as it did to finally come out. This was a big Kickstarter campaign in 2015 to 2016 and was originally pitched as The Man from Earth, the series. I think it's really important to know that when you walk into this movie because it really affects your enjoyment of it. I didn't know that. I was very disappointed with the ending of this movie, not realizing that it was kind of intended as a pilot. And I say kind of because I feel like the producers of this movie have been real inconsistent and, or I should say, I haven't made it especially clear as to whether or not this is supposed to be looked at as the first of an ongoing series or a movie. Because again, the Kickstarter was for a series, but they didn't want to get too far ahead of themselves, so they talked about it like a movie, where it was like, we want to make an ongoing series. This is going to be the further adventures of John Oldman, the Man from Earth, the Man from the Man from Earth. If you're not familiar with this, by the way, the basic premise of that movie is that there is a caveman who was immortal that has managed to live all the way up to present day. He's 14,000 years old and was actually Jesus. He was the man who Jesus was based on, and so he isn't actually the Son of God and never proclaimed to be, but the Bible happened and history recorded events differently than the way they happened, and so an entire religion was built up around him and his teachings, and he has spent all the time after that trying to be left alone. And that's kind of the premise of that, and it's used as a way to discuss the finer points of religion versus science and the ways people perceive the notion of God and the history, the way we understand it versus the way things really happened, and a whole lot of philosophical and science fiction ideas arise in the original as a closed room drama, where this guy who is a college professor decides to sit all of his friends down and explain this to them, and they don't immediately believe him, of course, and as it goes along, he has very compelling evidence just in the way he talks about things, and is able to convince them to some degree, at least some of them. Some of them are atheists, and one of them is a Christian, and so her faith is tested, and it's about all of that. This movie is about all that stuff again, but is more ambitious in that there's a lot of location shooting, and it's more of a traditional movie. The original film is kind of a big philosophical discussion as much as it's a story. And there is a story in that film, but it is a very My Dinner with Andre type thing, where it's a whole lot of philosophizing and discussing various ideas and giving us a sense of these characters, drawing these characters through the discussions they're having, as opposed to a lot of events that are going on. And it's bookended with a little bit of action, but not, I don't mean like choreographed, like fighting action, I just mean more going on than just some people sitting around on couches. But it is primarily a bunch of people sitting around on couches, and could easily be and has been put on stage. I would love to stage this as a play. The original was based on a script by Jerome Bixby, who is one of the most known and appreciated writers on Star Trek the original series. He did 4 episodes, including Mirror Mirror, and years ago I actually met his son a couple of times, and had him at my old Star Trek club, and he talked about his father's work, and that was absolutely fantastic. So I had a vested interest in the original film in 2007 because I was familiar with Jerome Bixby, and I knew his son. And now we get finally the sequel, and this is one of those things where I'm a little trepidatious about the notion of even doing this, because it starts to veer into mythology territory. It starts to veer into the territory of like doing a big sci-fi thing instead of the more thoughtful kind of discussion-based thing that the original movie was, but it's not insanely ambitious. And it's funny because like that ends up being part of the problem with it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So at first glance, I didn't want this thing to go too big, and then when I got to the end of it, I kind of wished it was a little bit bigger. So I don't know if that's just a grass is greener thing, but I'll get into it a little bit. So the original film has a very simple premise. What if there was one man who managed to live from antiquity going all the way up, and had all of this, and had like such a unique perspective on the world because he got to see every era, and like what would be the pros and cons of that? What would he sacrifice in order to, what parts of the human condition does that man sacrifice in never dying? Obviously, with a lot of immortal stories, we deal with loss and the fact that if you don't die, you will keep gaining and losing constantly. You got to get really used to change and how difficult that is. There aren't a lot of brand new ideas in this movie, except that it wants to be, and I say wants to be because I don't think it ever really gets at this enough, it wants to be beyond the relative religion ideas and what it would be like to be immortal. And the idea that there is maybe rational explanations for everything. It wants to be about how much things have changed just in the last 20 years, and the ways in which technology is changing us. There's a lot of talk about our current obsession with social media and how that's changing us as a species. Within the first 5 minutes, there's a speech about how if somebody from antiquity came, or caveman times, I don't remember how far back it went, came into present day, they wouldn't even recognize us because what we're about has changed so much. It used to be about basic survival, and now with technology and with social media, just like the way we live our lives and the reason we live our lives has changed so much that, and this is kind of the main premise of the story. Thematically, the idea is supposed to be that maybe we are entering into a new stage of human evolution that we have created ourselves, which is the best idea in the movie, and I wish it was brought more to the front, and I wish and I wish more of the movie was about that, and I wish that it was a little bit less typical TV movie stuff, because I wanted that idea to be explored. If we could have somehow gotten John back in a room just talking with people about that for an hour and a half, I would have been a happy camper. But again, it's a little bit more ambitious. So it's about that, and it's about, of course, the idea that we are destroying ourselves, and that and we find. I don't know how to talk about this without some spoilers, but and I'll try not to spoil everything, but the idea is, and it's weird that we don't get this till the very end, because it felt to me like this could have been given to us at any point in the movie. So this is, I will say this, so big major spoiler warning here. This is kind of the premise of the film, but it's treated as reveal, and we only get it at the end because it wants to kind of blindside us with this idea, but there's no reason we couldn't have gotten it earlier. So the idea is supposed to be, like there's this mystery surrounding John because he's immortal and he heals very quickly, but he's starting to age. And it seems like that idea is put into the film because the man playing John Oldman, who's the same actor, and now he's going by John Young. He always has some whimsical name that has something to do with the fact that he's immortal. And every few years, when people might start asking, "How come you're not aging?" he moves on to someplace else, and he's always really careful not to have pictures taken of him or anything. And I like that this movie talks about the fact that one of the big things that has changed just in the last several years since the first movie, and this is 10 years after the first movie, so it's, you know, it's in real time like that, is that you can't get away with not having your picture taken now because people have smartphones and there's cameras everywhere, and there's no way he could keep doing what he's doing. So at some point, the other shoe has to drop, and people have to start realizing that there is something special about this man. Except that he's also aging now, and so he's kind of like Old Man Logan. He's like old man, where he is beginning to age and he doesn't heal as quickly, and there's a big question as to why that's going on. And the answer, again, big spoiler alert, because I don't understand why we don't get this until the very, very end. It's like he just kind of suddenly lands on it. Like, it's a mystery, but it's not, the answer's not arrived at. He just finally goes, oh, you know, maybe it's this thing. It's that we are changing the world around us so much. We are destroying the environment, that maybe something about that is messing with John. And that's part of what makes him think that now we're moving into a new period of human evolution. So now it's the Holocene era, and that's why the movie's called Holocene. You don't get that until the very end. You have no idea why it's called that until you get to the last scene. And that's a really interesting premise, and I guess there is still a mystery as to what exactly it is about that's causing it, and if this were to be a series and continue, it would be cool if it actually gave us the ins and outs of that. But it isn't a real satisfying mystery because it's way in the background. Like, right at the beginning, it's just, and I'm aging, because again, the actor is 10 years older now, so you got to do something about that with a more hard science fiction premise, or you just hope that we won't notice. And I guess you could have gotten away with that. We do that with a lot of things. You know, like, we keep pretending like Hugh Jackman doesn't age, and he doesn't age like the rest of humanity, but he does look different in X-Men in 2000 than he does in Days of Future Past and then Logan. But this is kind of a more, you know, hard sci-fi kind of thing, so I guess they're trying to be, you know, as accurate and as, you know, believable as possible, and so they build in that idea, and it's not just like a throwaway explanation for why he looks older. That would then be the idea of the show. How come that's going on? And it's just, again, it's not brought enough to the fore, and it's not what the whole thing's about. It's just in the background. But then when you get to the end of the movie, you realize you're not watching a movie. You're watching a pilot. And it only works as a pilot because it's not a complete story. We spend a lot of time with setup that doesn't end up really paying off at the end. Most of the action in this film is a group of college kids who are religious studies majors that are taking a class under John Oldman, now called John Young, who stumble upon a book written by, you know, sort of like the book written by the Ghostbusters in the 2016 Ghostbusters, where like they believe in the paranormal but nobody believes them. It's like this. It's like that, where this guy from the first movie, the kind of crotchety professor in that, I think it's his house they all go to. I can't remember because it's been a while since I've seen the original. He's the only major recurring cast member who's in a lot of this movie, and then there's one more who I won't give away who shows up right at the very end in a cameo role, who I was waiting to see the whole movie, and he finally shows up, and that was fun. And I would assume if this went to series, he would be a major player moving forward, because it is set up like he would be. But anyway, so they discover this book that he wrote that got him about John Oldman, and basically recounting the entire discussion and experience from the first movie, and saying that he didn't believe it, but then he's done all this research and he can't account for John Oldman's past. He keeps finding people that resemble him in what little photography he can find and that have similar histories, and he can connect them all together, but none of those individual aliases seem to exist before a certain year, and so he starts believing the story, and that maybe this guy is 14,000 years old, maybe he really was Jesus, and he writes a book, and of course he's a laughingstock, and he's booted out of academia, and he still has a really nice house, and he seems to be a rich guy, but he doesn't get to do anything worthwhile, and so he's having a hard time and living a not a great life anymore. And these kids go to find him in order to try to tell him that they found John Oldman, because they don't believe it at first either, but they start doing all this research, and the story seems to check out. And so it's all about them trying to prove that John Young is actually John Oldman, and to figure out whether or not he really is immortal, and whether he really was Jesus. And things start going off the rails toward the end. Like, I'm with it all the way up to the kidnapping plot. It starts to degenerate into, like, crappy 90s television pretty hard, where this kid who I just don't buy would go as extreme as he does, with the background that he has. I don't feel like it was set up well enough for me to buy that he's practically a crypto freak. This kid ends up, taping John to a chair and trying to make him explain his past, because of course he's denying everything. And this kid is Christian, and he is kind of the stand-in for the woman in the first movie who is Christian, and all of her beliefs are tied to her faith, and so she can't have anybody come in and say that she's wrong. And he's that, but more extreme about it. And he starts to believe that maybe this guy actually is Jesus, or if he's not, maybe he's the Antichrist. We do that whole thing. And it veers into silly territory a little bit. Their discussion is interesting, but at some point it goes too far. And I have that a lot with this movie, where, a lot of because there still are a lot of philosophical discussions in this movie. This is still a very talky movie. It's not super plot heavy, but it's more plotty than the first movie, because we actually go places and do stuff. But sometimes those conversations don't seem quite as intelligent as they did in the first movie to me, and sometimes they just kind of run off with themselves and go a little bit too far. And I had this odd vibe with this, where it sometimes feels like an anti-Christian movie made like a Christian movie, and I don't think it's intending to be against religion, but it starts to come off that way toward the end, because, again, I just don't buy that this kid is starting to consider murdering John over ruining his belief system. And, I'm not saying that couldn't happen with a person, they just didn't make me quite buy it. It sort of came out of nowhere, and it seemed like it just really wanted to get to a really dramatic place. And it felt like if this was going to be a TV show, and that would be the formula, right? Like, somebody finds out about John, and then they try to take advantage of him in some way, or they can't handle his existence, and so they try to hurt him. There's this kind of like Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk vibe to this, and if it were a show, I think it would feel a lot like that. And tonally, that's fine. It just got a little bit melodramatic and a little bit silly toward the end. And like I said, there's all this setup. So we have to go get get that professor, and his car breaks down, and the kids have to go get him, and that's why the kid that's left behind has the opportunity to strap John to a chair, and then they get back and they can't find John, and not to give away the entire plot, but all of this ultimately leads to nothing. There's never a scene with John and the professor, because by the time he gets there, John is long gone, and then we get one more scene with John at the end, and the movie's over. And so it ends really abruptly, and it's hardly a story in and of itself. It feels like the first chapter of something. Nobody gets a complete character arc. I want to know what John coming back into this professor's life is going to do for or to this professor. It's the past coming back to haunt him. It's the thing that he's been trying to get away from coming back into his life, and he cannot help, out of just a morbid sense of curiosity, but to start pursuing it again, even though it's the thing that ruined his life. Well, that's interesting, but it's an interesting setup. And same thing with all of these kids. Like, I like them all okay, except I think the Christian kid is is not fully drawn. But I guess nobody gets really the chance to be, because it's not really a character piece for any of them. Like, nobody has really an opportunity for change. It's just, they're just kind of the sleuth kids, They're kind of the Scooby Gang, just investigating this weird mystery. And then at the end, he's gone. And no, what do we do? He's gone, and that's it. That's the movie. Which is why I say I started to wish, as a movie, that it was more ambitious, because there's all this talk at the beginning about, it's hinting as if it's going to get to a place maybe where people start to learn about John, and some people maybe would not be able to help but agree and believe that he is who he said he was in the first movie, and that the religion of Christianity built around him is not what it is in the Bible. And he has all this philosophical stuff toward the end about how we can all make the world a better place without needing God, and he doesn't have to be a god. No one needs to worship him, and it feels toward the beginning there's kind of some hints that the world is changing so much that he's not going to be able to run anymore. And I wanted to see what that would be like. I thought maybe we'd get kind of like a courtroom drama or something where he was like put on trial for being Jesus or whatever. And it doesn't go to that place, but maybe it could if it went on and was a series. So like, the biggest problem, this is weird, but the biggest problem with it is just that it's not upfront about what it is. I didn't know I was watching a TV pilot for a series that is probably never going to get made. I mean, it's only been out a year, so like if it gets more money, maybe, but they're not actively currently doing a Kickstarter, so like I don't really know what the point of this is. Like, it's the beginning of something, but it's presented as a film, and it's not done. Like, the story is just not over. So there's some really interesting and cool ideas, and it's thought-provoking in places, but they don't actually really amount to anything, and we don't get to know anything new about John really at all. I mean, like, I'm having to play catch-up with these kids when I already know all the background about John that we get in this movie. So I hate to do it. I think ultimately I have to say not feeling it. If I had a whole season of television, I might feel differently about it. But I'm going to say not feeling it if it's a movie, because it's not quite like, even up against something else like Serenity, right? Which was a thing based on a TV show that was made into a movie where we truncated like a whole season of television. It's still a complete film. Like, it feels kind of truncated because if that had been done in television, we would have spent more time on certain things. But like, it's still a complete story, beginning, middle, and end. This isn't. This gets to the middle and then it stops. So like, I might be feeling it later if more of this gets made and it keeps going. Like, the whole time I kept going, oh, this should be a TV show. Oh, okay, that's why, because they were making a TV show. Michael Dorn's in this. He plays a dean. He's great. He doesn't get a whole lot to do, and I would hope if this kept going, he would get to do more things, but he's got a really nice scene with John. There's some nice subtext with characters who don't realize that he's immortal, that in places sometimes verge on cutesy a little bit, kind of winking at the audience, but for the most part, it's just pretty good subtext. I enjoyed this until I got to the end and realized that it wasn't done, and then it was really kind of disappointing. But yeah, that's how I felt about it. If you have happened to see this, I doubt that more than a few people are going to watch this video, but if you happen to have seen this, leave your comment and let me know if you felt the same way I did about it, or if you liked it more. And thanks a bunch for watching, folks. I will see you again with more reviews later on in Geekolution. I am Captain Logan, and thanks again for watching.